Welcome to this About Life video course. My name is Simon, and hopefully over the next 8 videos we will explore together some pretty big questions that could and should change the way we understand our purpose in life. Now, COVID-19 has shown us how fragile this world is and how easily our lives can get turned upside down. And maybe that has made you think that life as we knew it just isn't worth putting your trust in anymore. Maybe you want to find something more secure to trust in, something or someone that at least has a plan. Well, this course will hopefully show you that there is something else you can trust in, and it will also help us to understand our past, our present, and our futures. Now, being asked to rethink your entire existence doesn't come without its reservations and uncertainties. Now, I don't know if being here and watching this is hard for you, or whether bigger questions make you uncomfortable. If they do, well then congratulations, you are a normal human being. No one finds this stuff comfortable. So maybe this virus and the way it has shown the fragility of our lives has got you thinking. Maybe there has been something that has happened recently in your life that has made you question your previous outlook. Maybe life used to be simple, but it has gotten complicated, and you would like to know why. Maybe, at some point, your life had religion as part of it, but it didn't stack up against life's trials and has left you with an unsteady relationship with God. Whatever your situation, we hope that this course will give you something to be certain of. So, why do I think this course is important? Well, I think it's important because I believe that our existence is not a fluke. I believe that we have been created, and our Creator is a loving being who has a plan for this earth and every living person in it. So in this video and the next, I would like to show you that this belief is not only reasonable, but actually the most logical one to have, based on the scientific evidence available. And if you're convinced by that, then it makes sense to find out what God's plan is. And my belief is that the Bible contains that plan. But first, I think it's important to establish the difference between a belief in the Bible and religion. Religion is a human interpretation of God's will. And the key word there is human, because that means that any interpretation comes with predetermined bias, misunderstanding, and agendas. And at best, this can mean that religion is boring, dreary, and irrelevant. And at worst, it can be manipulative and dangerous. Besides, how can some person called Jesus living 2,000 years ago on the other side of the world have any relevance to my life? But there is still something missing. You can feel it. Something in your life is missing. There is a hole, there is a gap that is not being satisfied. And I think it's fair to say that the majority of our lives are spent thinking, when I get this, then I will be happy. This is Lionel Messi, and he is arguably the best player to have ever played football. Yet he never managed to get his hands on the most coveted of trophies, the World Cup. This is as close as he came, when his country, Argentina, lost in the World Cup final. So even if you are the best and one of the highest paid players, you don't always get what you want. Now, at primary school, I remember thinking that when I get to high school, that it will be great. And when I got to high school, it was great. But then after about 3 weeks, the novelty wore off and the hard work set in. And I remember wishing that I could leave already. And then when I did leave, I could finally do what I wanted. Well, when I left school, I enjoyed my summer holidays immensely, knowing that I was done studying and I deserved the break. But it took about a month and some serious parental nagging to realize that I needed to make more decisions. So I went to uni and I graduated. Then I needed a job, and then I needed a promotion. But there was still something missing. So what I need is a girlfriend. Okay, now we need to get married. Now we need to have kids. Now I need a pay rise. And now I need to retire. Now, all of these things in and of themselves can offer amazing fulfillment and satisfaction to our lives. But you know as well as I do that this is a very simplistic plan for life that very rarely goes as expected. And at some point, bigger questions need to be asked. It all comes down to thinking that there has to be more to life than this. Vernon Levin, who was regarded as one of Britain's best and most famous journalists, wrote, "Countries like ours are full of people who have all the material comforts they desire, together with such non-material blessings like a happy family, yet they lead lives of desperation, understanding nothing but the fact that there is a hole inside them, and that however much food and drink they pour into it, however many motor cars and television sets they stuff it with, however many well-balanced children and loyal friends, they parade around the edges of it, and it aches." Russell Brand said this: "Drugs and alcohol are not my problem. Reality is my problem. Drugs and alcohol are my solution to fill up a hole inside me." Now, maybe you can relate to those feelings, that we experience a hole in our life, a sort of hunger that can't be satisfied. And I would suggest that every human being experiences that feeling at some point or other. Now, Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." Now, what he was saying was that he was the only one who could satisfy this spiritual hunger, that nothing else apart from him will satisfy that. There's a well-known story of a nanny from Sweden. And one time, the children she was looking after were having a big fight. And she ran outside and shouted, "What are you doing on earth?" Now, of course, what she meant to say was, "What on earth are you doing?" But in her mistake, she actually asked a far deeper and more important question. What are you doing on earth? Why are we here? What is the point? What is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? And these are the most important questions of life. A lot of people spend a lot of time and effort trying to find out what the ultimate meaning and purpose of life is. And many think that the answer is money or fame. But look at this quote from the actor Jim Carrey. He said, "I think everyone should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it is not the answer." Freddie Mercury, of course, he amassed a huge fortune. He attracted thousands of fans, but he admitted in an interview shortly before his death that he was desperately lonely. He said, "You can have everything in the world and still be the loneliest man. Success has brought me world idolization and millions of pounds, but it has prevented me from having the one thing we all need, a loving, ongoing relationship." I think all of this is epitomized by this phrase: "He who dies with the most toys still dies." So life must be more than what we own, or even more than what we succeed at. And what the Bible says is that it has the answers to life's big questions. So what's the point of life? Well, let's have a look at this quote from Numbers 14, verse 21. "As truly as I," that's God, "as truly as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord." Now, this is very interesting because it flips everything on its head. Let's look at what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that the point of life is to die with the most money. It doesn't say the point of life is to reach a mental state of inner peace and understanding. And it doesn't say the earth will be filled with people with successful marriages and loads of possessions. In fact, it clearly isn't really about us at all. It's about God and about filling the earth with his glory. Now, I can't finish it there and say, "There you go, I've showed you the point of life, now go away and live your life entirely differently." Because what does filling the earth with his glory even mean? What is his glory? How can you fill the earth with anything? Won't it just float off into space? Well, there's a fascinating account in the Old Testament where God answers that very question. Moses asked God to show him his power. So Moses was expecting to see God physically. But what God actually does is list his characteristics or personality traits. And if you want to look it up later or pause this video and look at it now, it is in Exodus 33 and 34. So to fill the earth with God's glory means to fill the earth with the characteristics of God. And to help us understand what that actually looks like, God had a son called Jesus. And the whole aim of his life was to show us what God is like. So the Bible is saying that the earth will be filled with people like Jesus, behaving in exactly the way God wants and having a very close relationship with him. So Jesus said in John 14, verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And these three things are important because he is claiming to be the answer. He says, I am the way. And you can ask, but what about all the other ways? And Jesus says, don't worry about all of those. I am the truth. And you can ask, but is it worth it? And Jesus says, I am the life. So your search ends here with Jesus. Okay, but you might ask, if there is more to life than this, then there are a few things you have to prove. The first, that there is a God. Second, that the Bible is what it says it is. Third, that Jesus did exist. Fourth, that Jesus was resurrected from the dead. All totally understandable requests. And it is up to me to prove all of that to you in this video and the next. But let me try and illustrate what a belief in a creator is like. We had a couple of friends over from the UK recently, one of whom is colorblind. And we were talking about the new glasses that have been invented recently that can correct your vision so you can see all colors correctly. So in effect, it allows you to see how everyone else actually sees things. And if you've seen any of the videos, it's an emotional experience because you are seeing the vividness of the world for the first time, and it is overwhelming. And I guess a major factor in the experience is that you realize what you've been missing. It's the sort of experience you can never take back and you will never forget. Now, you can, of course, take the glasses off and go back to the way you used to see things, but in comparison, it will be grayer and duller because of the knowledge you now have. So seeing a creator in the creation around us, instead of evolution, is like being able to see the colors clearly. That's what happens when you see the world as created rather than evolved. Now life has a purpose and a meaning, instead of everything just being mindless and random. Now, you've probably heard of the Fibonacci sequence. Again, if you haven't, pause this video, have a Google. But the Fibonacci sequence is basically, as far as I understand it, the maths sequence which everything in nature follows. Now, to me, that shows that nature was created by somebody who knew what he was doing. And for that sequence to be consistent, which it is, throughout the whole of creation, by a chance of evolution, is ludicrous in my mind. Now, science is important, but it answers different questions to faith. Science tries to answer when and how this world came into being. What it can't answer is why. So let's imagine I've got a cake. Now, suppose we sent this cake to the top scientist in the world. They would be able to tell what ingredients were put into this cake, the mass and density of the cake. They could probably tell you how and when it was made. They could probably take the DNA and find out who made it. But what they can't tell you is why it was made. Only the creator of the cake can tell us why it was made. And that, in a small way, is the difference between science and faith. Science is important because it deals with scientific questions. But equally, faith is also really important because it answers some very fundamental questions about life. I would suggest that everyone has faith. An atheist has faith that there is no God. A believer has faith that there is a God. But if you believe in God, you must do so on the basis of evidence. And you might say, if I do believe in God, then I'm going against virtually every reputable scientist in the world. They all believe in evolution. Well, actually, that's not true. There are varying stats on how many top scientists believe in God, and I guess that figure is largely influenced by what you want the answer to be. But some have put it at over 50% of scientists do believe in God. But either way, just because you are a scientist, it doesn't mean you become privileged to information that conclusively proves God doesn't exist, and that this information is not available to the common person. Because plenty of very intelligent scientists believe in a creator. Let me put a few quotes up that put forward the argument that God does exist from scientists. This is Allan Sandage, arguably the world's greatest cosmologist, and he said, "The world is too complicated in all its parts and interconnections to be due to chance alone. I'm convinced the existence of life in all its order, in all its organisms, is too well put together. Each part of a living thing depends on the other to function. The world is more complicated than can be explained by science. Only by the supernatural can I understand the mystery of its existence." And he is one of many scientists who have come to the conclusion that the universe isn't the result of a cosmic accident. The more they understand how carefully the world is put together, the more that they realize that it needed an intelligent designer. Paul Davies, who used to be a professor of theoretical physics at Adelaide University, now at Arizona University, says, "The universe is put together with an ingenuity so astonishing, I can't accept it as a mere quirk of fate, an accident of history." The world's top astrophysicist, Owen Gingerich, stated, "A common sense and satisfying interpretation of our world suggests the designing hand of a superintelligence." Rob Collins, and I couldn't find a picture of Rob Collins, so this random scientist guy in front of a blackboard will have to do. Rob Collins, a triple major in mathematics, physics and philosophy of Washington University, said, "The universe's just right conditions are widely regarded as the most persuasive argument of the existence of God. Our minds can't comprehend the precision required to create the universe that has just the right conditions to sustain life. The coincidences are too amazing to be happenstance." Now, Richard Dawkins, who definitely does not believe in God, still said this: "Living objects look like they were designed. They look overwhelmingly as if designed. If you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology, you might find a signature of some sort of designer. And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe." Now, I would suggest that if it looks designed, it is designed. If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably worth considering calling it a duck. C.S. Lewis said, "God is not the sort of thing one can be moderately interested in. After all, if God does not exist, there's no reason to be interested in God at all. But on the other hand, if God does exist, then it is of paramount interest, and our ultimate concern ought to be how to be properly related to this being upon whom we depend moment by moment for our very existence." Now, our later videos will look at how we can have a relationship with God in order to improve our lives. So I would strongly suggest that you watch all of the videos, and towards the end, we will get to the practical outworking of a faith in God. Now, one thing that I think is worth clearing up is the assumption that if you do believe in God and that he created the earth, then you have to believe that it happened only 6,000 years ago. Yet most scientists, including the ones I've quoted, believe the world is far older. And there's heavy evidence that that is true. Now, the Bible doesn't say when the universe and the earth was created. It was in the beginning, without specifying when that was. So if the earth is many millions of years old, I don't think the Bible contradicts that. When God started creating the world as we know it, he had already created the earth, so it was already there. So let's take a look at Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. The earth, to start off with, was formless and empty." So we have no idea how long things were in this state before the real creating work began. So I think you can believe in a creator and an old earth without contradicting the Bible. In the next video, we'll explore things like the Big Bang Theory and our DNA and our finely tuned world, and see if it fits in with an intelligent designer. But there are three final things to think of. 1. If God doesn't exist, then life is ultimately meaningless. If you're going to die, it doesn't really matter how you live. In the end, it makes no difference whether you existed or not. You may have discovered a cure for a disease, a vaccination for coronavirus. You may have developed a system that could warn of earthquakes. You may have successfully negotiated a peace deal and saved thousands of lives. And those are all incredible things. But in the cold, hard light of day, all you have done is delay the inevitable. Death will still come, but you have managed to suspend it for a few years. Now, these truly great feats still don't fill that missing space. Doing good is a thing to be expected, to be admired, and to be strived for. But without God, there is still something missing. If God doesn't exist, there is no hope. There is no cure for the human condition that we all get sick, we all get sad, we all let people down, and we all die. There is no hope beyond the grave. But if God does exist, there is not only meaning and hope, but there is a possibility of getting to know him and getting closer to him. If God exists, it makes not only a tremendous difference for mankind in general, but it could mean a life-changing difference for you as well. It is the difference between meaninglessness and a new life of hope and meaning. Okay, so what are we going to look at in the next video? Well, the plan is that we get into the finer details of why so many scientists believe there is an intelligent designer. And that based is on the evidence that there can only be one conclusion, that there is a God.